Sunglasses, sweaters, credit cards, USBs, pens, you name it. I've already lost it before. I bet at one point when I was younger, my mom would think to herself if I was just clumsy or flat out stupid. But I bet she still thinks this today as well. But what she also knows is that I'm extremely stubborn, and my completely out of proportion ego will not let me admit this flaw. But this past semester, something really special happened. I lost my ego, and I found a new pride, a pride not in myself, but a pride in a new energy and creativity that can only be found by working with other people. When I first started making and designing my own 3D printer, there were a number of issues. But the biggest one was that I thought I knew a lot. I had used all these different digital tools and machines in my previous 4 years at USC, so I was overconfident, and I wanted to really challenge myself. So I asked myself the question, how hard would it be to actually make and design my own 3D printer? The answer then was probably along the lines of, meh, it's probably not too tough. And with the 2020 hindsight I have right now, the RIA 2.0 really isn't that complicated. So let me quickly walk you through how it works. The RIA 2.0 is not a complete 3D printer on its own. Rather, it's a specific part of a 3D printer. So you know that thing in your inkjet printer that like moves around and it dispenses the ink? Well, basically, the RIA is an oversized version of that. So my modified design adds a couple extra axes in movement known as the I, the J, and the K. And traditional printers have one or maximum two things that dispense the material. And those things I call nozzles. Well, my printer has 4 nozzles. But as said earlier, the RIA really isn't an autonomous entity. It requires a few friends for it to function fully. The first friend is a device that can move it in 3-dimensional space, whether that be a Cartesian robot or a robot arm, anything that can move it in the X, Y, and Z coordinates. In this particular case, its friend is the Euclid bot, developed and assembled by Zach, which I will bring back later. The second friend is an extrusion system, or something that supplies a material known as resin to my nozzles. So resin is a composite material. That means there are 2 parts to it. And when the 2 parts come together, it solidifies within a certain time frame. An easy way to think about this is Yogurtland. When you go to Yogurtland, there are about 2.5 flavors per stand. Why? Because they have the 2 traditional flavors on the 2 outside ends, to your left and your right, and there's the central flavor, which is a mixture of the 2. So imagine when you dispense the central flavor, it also solidifies into ice as it's being dispensed. Well, that's exactly how resin behaves. So if and only if we have those 2 friends, the Cartesian robot, in this case the Euclid, and a system that supplies the resin to my printer, then it will be a fully functional printer. So now you're thinking, this RIA thing, it's only a combination of 3 parts. Easy peasy, right? Standing where I am right now, I can honestly tell you it was about 100,000 times harder than I had imagined and 100,000 times more frustrating than I had imagined. I still remember the first day I had decided to do everything myself. And I got these things called servos. And they're this specific type of motor. And I read the instruction manuals and kind of was fiddling around doing other things at the same time as well. And I had them wired, in retrospect, pretty poorly. But I still managed to get them work in about 2 hours. And I thought, piece of cake, time to go party. But what I didn't know was that these servos were the easiest part of the whole thing. And it was only going to get harder. Despite all of this, I decided I would procrastinate heavily. I kept pace with my studio mates. I never really asked any questions during class. And if I got stuck, I asked a very good acquaintance of mine how to do things, Google. At one point, I even got way far ahead, actually. So, I thought I was the bomb. Beaming with pride and confidence, when I got my second set of motors, these were called steppers, I figured I would ask this cute girl in my class if she wanted to come over and work on some things. You know, maybe I could coast through the setup, find time for a movie afterwards, who knows? So she came over and she brought her things. And we go through the manual. Lo and behold, the steppers don't work. So we try it again, and it doesn't work. And we try it again, and it doesn't work. Turns out these steppers, they're a little bit more complicated. And they require a little bit of extra work. So not only did the motors not end up working that night, I also managed to destroy about $100 worth in electronics, and I gave myself 2 electrical burns. I'm impressed by myself, but by my stupidity. But nonetheless, you know that meme with the dog and the chemistry set? Yeah, it says, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's probably what I look like, right? But things only got worse from there. I had no organizational system and too many parts. I was unfamiliar with the new software I had to use. And I didn't even know what new things I had to order so that I could make forward progress. Basically, I had designer's block. I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. And so the problem was, though, that I knew I was stuck, but I was too proud to admit that I needed the help to get forward. And the turning point finally came when my professor, Chris Moon, started pushing for substantial progress. And I had to swallow my pride. And I asked and I reached out to the teaching assistant, Zachary Schock, for some help. And thank God, Zach was smart, humble, accessible, and friendly. And I got feedback really quickly, and we made leaps in progress. And I had a moving prototype very, very soon. But that wasn't enough. You see, we still had a little bit more work left to do. As I said earlier, the RIA really isn't an autonomous entity. So if this were a car, I had designed the engine, but there were no wheels and axles for it to move. So in order to find me some wheels and axles, Chris had scheduled to go to a fabrication company so that we could attempt to attach my project onto a robot arm so that I would actually be able to print. And of course, this scheduling time had to be at 6 in the morning, and it had to be at some random place I've never been, 10 miles away. It really didn't help that I wasn't a morning person either, so I'm completely thrown off, super exhausted, and I found out also earlier that morning my project doesn't even fit in my own car. So I had to borrow my friend's car and drive it over. Basically, long story short, I get to this place, and once again, I have no idea what I'm doing. I kind of just freeze, and I start panicking silently, and I look really stupid. That day, next thing you know, 2 hours fly by, and I'm talking with Chris and Zach completely crestfallen. I say, I think I bit off a bit more than I could chew. That was a new low point for me, because I looked like a fool, but I looked like a fool in front of people that had placed their faith in me. I was really ashamed, and I kind of didn't know what to do. But this time it was different. This time I wasn't alone, and they were sitting right beside me, offering words of encouragement, because I knew I would be able to overcome this. So I got in not my own car, and I drove home. And on the way home, actually, my printer fell off the frame that I was in, and it kind of just smashed itself because I went over a pothole. And literally, there were bits and pieces all over the trunk. And I guess that was a nice foreshadowing of the imminent rebirth to come. So, filled with this new ambition and desire to prove everyone wrong, I once again consulted Zach with a bunch of things, and we began redesigning things in a matter of hours, and Zach gave me feedback, and it was this nice loop of rinse and repeat, refine, really, really quickly. And in no time, I had replaced every single one of my acrylic parts with aluminum, and I had redesigned all of the kind of joints and connections so that it would smoothen the movement. And in literally 2 weeks, we had a brand new prototype, ready to be tested. No, actually it was more than ready. It was itching for the resin to course through its tubes. So, once this was done, we still needed some sort of material extrusion system to supply the resin to my printer. And I had this urgency, this really pressing urgency. So I slapped together a modified caulking gun that would supply the material to my printer in 5 days. And last Sunday, we tried test printing for the first time. As I was setting up, as you can see in the picture, Zach swung by with one of his buddies. And he said, "Oh, by the way, that's Eugene. And all the way over there is a little baby." And hearing that sentence, it finally hit me. All that hard work, all those terrible, terrible times where I stayed up all night, and all the happy times that I had fun breezing through my project, everything had now finally paid off. I had gained Zach's approval, trust, and if you could say, respect. And that was really nice. Later that afternoon, we tested, and I got my first print. That's it over there. It's not really impressive at all. It's just a little vertical line going up, and it looks really gross. There's like a bunch of orange on the bottom, and you know. But it was a step, and for me, it was a huge step. As you can see in the photo, I'm smiling and I'm super happy about it. But that day, we had only tested one of the 4 nozzles, and that wasn't enough for me. I needed to have all 4 working. So this next time, I set up at USC, by the USC woodshop. And I didn't even have my full setup that day, but there were people swarming around, asking questions, making comments. And to me, that day, it almost felt like a spaceship launch. I really have a tough time describing the feelings that I was experiencing at the moment. But I can say it was this kind of strange pride. Pride not in myself, but a pride in my project's ability to bring people together. It was so nice seeing all these designers and artists and soon-to-be architects in the same space with the same curious smile. And that, to me, was special. So, a lot of times, designers, including myself, we get so caught up in your own work and your own kind of personality. And you develop this ego. And you neglect the fact that other people can provide great input into what you're doing. And they can really help make you generate awesome forward progress. So this is my critique on the do-it-yourself culture. While the DIY culture encourages everyone to learn things on their own, and learn things from their own mistakes, and try things out by themselves, what that means is everyone can fail in a different way. And that provides an even greater variation in solutions. What that also means is that people can get to the same end result with drastically different working methods. But what it truly fails to recognize is how much we can help each other just by talking, communicating, collaborating. Because you can't do everything yourself. You need that help. You just need to admit it. So now I present to you the RIA 2.0 with its good friend, the Euclid bot. And it's moving around. It's not fully quite printing yet. The supply system isn't there, and I kind of ran out of resin. But we will get there soon. But what I really want to say is that in a world of cutthroat competition and a cornucopia of talent, The only way to truly set yourself apart is to communicate and collaborate. So I really urge everyone else to adopt a similar attitude. Thank you.